I didn't tell my son about the oceanfront property in Cape Breton my wife left me. 3 days after Margaret's funeral, Stephen walked into my kitchen and said we needed to talk about getting me settled somewhere more manageable. I simply nodded and poured him coffee. That evening, after he left, I opened the envelope Margaret had hidden in her desk and made a call to Halifax. The funeral had been on a Tuesday. By Friday morning, Stephen and his wife Brittany were sitting in my living room in Toronto with a real estate agent. Margaret had been gone exactly 72 hours. "Dad, we know this is hard," Stephen said, adjusting his tie. He'd worn the same tie to his mother's service. "But this house is too much for you. For bedrooms, that big yard, all these stairs. Mom would want you somewhere safe." Brittany nodded, her perfectly manicured hand resting on a folder full of retirement home brochures. "We've done the research, Thomas. There's a lovely facility in Mississauga. They have activities, meal plans, a nurse on staff 24/7. The real estate agent, a young woman named Ashley, smiled at me with practiced sympathy. "Mr. Morrison, in this market, a house like this could sell in days. We're talking 2.5, maybe 2.6 million. Think of the security that would give you." I looked around the room where Margaret and I had hosted 30 years of dinner parties, where we'd celebrated birthdays and anniversaries, where she'd corrected thousands of student papers while I graded my own. The morning light came through the bay window exactly as it always had. "I need time to think," I said. Stephen leaned forward. "Dad, we can't wait too long. The market's hot right now, and honestly, the maintenance on this place, the property taxes, it's going to drain your savings. We're trying to help you." "Your son is right to be concerned," Ashley said. "At your age, liquidity is important." I was 68 years old. Margaret had been 66. We'd planned to have another 20 years together, maybe 30. Instead, I got 3 weeks' notice. A headache that wouldn't go away. Then the diagnosis, then hospice, then a hole in the world where she used to be. "I'll think about it," I repeated. After they left, I sat in Margaret's study. She'd been a literature professor specialized in maritime Canadian writers. The walls were lined with books, most of them annotated in her small, precise handwriting. Her laptop sat on the desk, password protected, but I knew the password. I'd always known it. I opened the laptop and found the folder labeled "For Thomas when I'm gone." Inside were 3 documents. The first was a letter. "My dearest Thomas," it began. "If you're reading this, I'm gone and Stephen has already started circling. I know my son Thomas. I know what he'll do, so listen carefully. But what if the grieving widower had a secret his greedy son never saw coming? Welcome to Twisted Reckoning, where family betrayal meets ice-cold revenge." I read the letter 3 times that night. Then I read the second document, which was a property deed. Then I read the third document, which was a contract with her publisher regarding royalty payments. Then I called the lawyer in Halifax, whose number Margaret had written at the bottom of the letter. His name was Robertson. He'd been expecting my call. "Professor Morrison," he said, "I'm so sorry for your loss. Margaret was an extraordinary woman. She came to see me 2 years ago to set this up." 2 years ago, I said. "She knew she was sick 2 years ago." "No," Robert said gently. "She told me she just wanted to be prepared. She said Stephen had a way of making everything about money and she wanted to make sure you'd be protected." On Monday, Stephen came back. This time, he brought Brittany and a lawyer of his own. "Dad, we've been thinking," Stephen said. "Maybe you shouldn't live alone at all, even in a retirement home. What if you moved in with us? We have that basement suite. It's finished. Has its own bathroom. You'd be with family." I imagined myself in their basement in Oakville, listening to Brittany's footsteps above my head, eating dinner at their table when invited, trying to stay out of the way. "That's very generous," I said. "And about the house," Brittany added. "We could help you manage the sale. Stephen has financial expertise and I know the real estate market. We'd make sure you got every penny, minus a small fee for our time, of course." "Family rates." "Of course," I echoed. Their lawyer, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, slid papers across my kitchen table. "This is just a power of attorney, Mr. Morrison. It would allow Stephen to handle the sale on your behalf, manage the proceeds, make sure your finances are in order." Given your age and recent loss, it's really just sensible planning. I looked at the papers. I looked at my son. He had Margaret's eyes, but none of her warmth. When had that happened, or had it always been there, and I just refused to see it? I need to show you something first, I said. I went to Margaret's study and came back with a photo album. Inside were pictures from 1987 when Stephen was 7 years old. Margaret and I standing in front of a small cabin in Cape Breton, the Atlantic Ocean stretching behind us. Stephen as a child building sandcastles on the beach. A younger version of Margaret, her hair still dark, smiling at the camera. Do you remember this place? I asked Stephen. He barely glanced at the photos. That old cabin. Dad, that was decades ago. What does that have to do with anything? Your mother loved it there, I said. We went every summer until you turned 12 and decided you were too old for family vacations. It was boring, Stephen said. There was nothing to do. No internet, no cable, just rocks and seagulls. Dad, focus. We're talking about your future, not some nostalgia trip. I closed the album. You're right, I said. Let me think about these papers. Give me a week. Brittany's smile tightened. Thomas, we really think you should act quickly. The housing market won't stay this hot forever. And honestly, at your age, procrastination isn't wise. A week, I said again. After they left, I called Robert Chin. They're moving faster than Margaret predicted. I told him. Are you ready to proceed with her plan? He asked. I looked around the house. Margaret was everywhere and nowhere. Her coffee mug still in the sink. Her coat still hanging by the door. Her absence so loud it drowned out everything else. Yes, I said. I'm ready. But here's the twist that will shock you. The dead wife planned every move from beyond the grave. Stay with twisted reckoning to see greed destroy the greedy. The next day, my granddaughter Claire came to visit. She was in her second year at the University of Toronto studying art history. She looked like Margaret, same high cheekbones, same way of tilting her head when she was thinking. Grandpa, are you okay? She asked. Dad said, You're selling the house and moving to a home. Is that what you want? I made us tea the way Margaret always had. Claire, let me ask you something. Are you happy at university? She shrugged. It's fine. The classes are good. But honestly, I'm not sure what I'm doing it for. Art history isn't exactly a practical degree according to Dad. He keeps telling me I should switch to business or finance, something useful. What do you want to do? I asked. I want to work in museums, she said. Or maybe archives. I love old things, stories about where things came from. But Dad says that's not a real career. He says I'm wasting my time and his money. I thought about Margaret, who'd spent 40 years teaching literature to students who mostly just wanted to pass English 101 and move on. She'd loved every minute of it. Claire, I said, how would you feel about taking a year off school? She blinked. What? I'm not selling this house to move to a retirement home, I said. I'm leaving Toronto and I could use some help. Your grandmother left me something and I need someone I trust to help me figure it out. It would mean leaving school for a while, maybe a year, but I'd pay you and you'd have time to figure out what you really want. Leaving Toronto? Going where? Cape Breton? I said Nova Scotia. Her eyes widened. That place from the old photos with the ocean. That place, I confirmed. Dad would lose his mind, she said. But she was smiling. Probably, I agreed. Are you in? She didn't hesitate. I'm in. That night, Stephen called. Dad, I talked to Ashley. She can list the house this week. We need to get you packed up and moved. Brittany found a great retirement community. They have an opening in 2 weeks. I've made a decision, I said. I'm not selling. Silence on the other end of the line. Then what do you mean you're not selling? Dad, we discussed this. You can't manage this house alone. Be reasonable. I'm not staying here either, I said. I'm moving to Nova Scotia. More silence then. Nova Scotia. Dad, do you hear yourself? That's insane. You don't know anyone there. What would you even do? Your mother left me a property there, I said. A house by the ocean. I'm going to live in it. What property? Mom never mentioned any property in Nova Scotia. She didn't mention a lot of things, I said. But she was very thorough. Dad, listen to me. You're not thinking clearly. You just lost Mom. You're grieving. You can't make major decisions right now. This is exactly why you need family to help you. I appreciate your concern, I said. But my mind is made up. We're coming over tomorrow, he said. We need to talk about this face to face. Don't do anything until we talk. He hung up before I could respond. The next morning, Stephen and Brittany arrived at 8 a.m. With them was a doctor, a young man with a briefcase and a concerned expression. Dad, this is Dr. Harrison, Stephen said. He's a geriatric specialist. We just want him to do a quick evaluation. Make sure you're okay to make these kinds of decisions. I looked at the doctor. Did my son tell you I have dementia? Dr. Harrison shifted uncomfortably. He expressed some concerns about your judgment. Given your recent loss and your age, it's not unusual for cognitive function to decline. I'm just here to run some simple tests. I don't consent to any tests, I said. And I'd like you to leave my house. Dad, don't be difficult, Brittany said. We're trying to help. If you're competent, the tests will prove it. Unless you have something to hide. I have nothing to hide, I said. But I also have no obligation to prove my competence to you. Dr. Harrison, I appreciate that my son brought you here, but I'm not your patient, and I'm not submitting to evaluation. Good morning. The doctor left. Stephen stayed. What's really going on, Dad? He asked. Is this about money? Are you worried about your finances? Because Brittany and I can help. We can manage everything for you. You don't need to worry. I'm not worried, I said. Then why are you running away to Nova Scotia? Why are you refusing to sell this house when you could have millions in the bank? Why are you taking Claire out of university? Yes, she told us. What kind of grandfather derails his granddaughter's education for some fantasy about living by the ocean? The kind who listens when his granddaughter says she's not happy, I said. The kind who respects her choice. Her choice? She's 20 years old. She doesn't know what she wants, and you're enabling her to throw away her future. Do you know how much her tuition costs? Do you know what we've invested in her education? Do you know what she wants to do with her life? I asked. Have you ever asked her? Stephen stood up. I'm not going to let you do this. If you won't be reasonable, I'll take legal action. I'll prove you're not competent to handle your affairs. I'll get guardianship. That house is family property, and I'm not letting you give it away to some fantasy. Family property, I said quietly. Your mother and I bought this house in 1982. We paid every mortgage payment. We paid for every repair. You didn't contribute a single dollar. This house is mine, Stephen, not yours. Mine, and what I do with it is my decision. We'll see about that, he said and left. I called Robert Chen again. They're gonna fight this, I told him. Let them, he said. Margaret made sure everything was airtight. The Cape Breton property is in your name only. It was purchased 20 years ago with her inheritance from her parents before you moved to joint finances. They can't touch it, and the royalties from her books go directly to you as her widower. It's all documented. What about the Toronto house? I asked. That's where it gets interesting, Robert said. Margaret did some research. She discovered that your foundation is failing. Did you know that? I didn't. She hired an inspector to check 2 years ago when she first came to see me. The foundation has major structural issues. It's going to cost at least $400,000 to repair, maybe more. And that's not all. The city is doing a property tax reassessment in your neighborhood. Your taxes are about to triple, and your homeowners association has a special assessment coming for infrastructure repairs. Another $50,000 due in 6 months. How did Margaret know all this? I asked. She read every letter, every notice, every piece of mail that came to the house, Robert said. And when something concerned her, she investigated. She knew Stephen would come after this house the moment she died. She wanted to make sure you understood what you'd actually be giving him. I thought about Margaret quietly gathering information, quietly preparing, protecting me even after she was gone. So if I sell the house, I said slowly, whoever buys it is going to face a financial nightmare. Correct, Robert said. But here's what Margaret suggested. You transfer the house to Stephen now as a gift. You don't sell it. You give it to him before the assessment goes through, before the foundation inspector files his report publicly, before the special assessment notice goes out. You give it to him as his inheritance early. And then I asked, and then you take Claire and you move to Cape Breton. You live in the ocean house, which is paid off and has no issues. You live on Margaret's book Royalties, which will give you about $280,000 a year for the rest of your life. Margaret's books are used in university courses across Canada. The royalties are steady and recurring. And Stephen, I asked. Stephen gets exactly what he wanted, Robert said. The house, all of it. His name on the deed, his problem to deal with. I was quiet for a long time. She was brilliant, I finally said. Yes, Robert agreed. She was. Imagine gifting your son a multimillion-dollar home, only for it to bankrupt him. This is twisted reckoning at its finest. The paperwork took 2 weeks. During that time, Stephen called every day, sometimes twice a day, demanding I reconsider. He threatened lawyers. He threatened to have me declared incompetent. He showed up at my door with more retirement home brochures. I stayed calm. I stayed quiet. I let him rant. And then, on a cold Monday in March, I invited him to the house. I've thought about what you said. I told him, you're right. I can't manage this place alone. And Claire needs to be in school, not following her grandfather on some impractical adventure. So, I'm going to give you what you want. His expression shifted from suspicion to surprise to triumph. You're selling better, I said. I'm giving the house to you now as an early inheritance. It's yours. Brittany's eyes went wide. Are you serious? Completely serious, I said. My lawyer drew up the transfer papers. The house goes to you free and clear. No sale, no division of proceeds, no complications. It's yours. I slid the papers across the table. Stephen read them twice, looking for the catch. But there was no catch. The house was being transferred entirely to him. What about you? He asked. Where will you live? I have Margaret's life insurance, I said. It's enough for a small apartment somewhere. I'll be fine. You and Brittany will have the house. You can live here, sell it, rent it, whatever you want. It's your property now. He signed. Brittany signed. They practically ran out of the house to file the paperwork before I could change my mind. I watched them go, then turned to Claire. Ready? I asked. She grinned. Ready? We packed everything that mattered into a moving truck. Margaret's books, the photo albums, my research files, Claire's art supplies, everything else we left for Stephen. The drive to Cape Breton took 2 days. We stayed overnight in Fredericton, ate fish and chips in a small diner, talked about Margaret and what she'd been like as a young professor. Claire had never heard those stories. Stephen had never asked. The house in Cape Breton sat on 3 acres overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. It was exactly as I remembered it, but better. Margaret had renovated it over the years, updating the plumbing and electrical, adding skylights and a modern kitchen. The walls were lined with windows. You could hear the waves from every room. Grandpa Claire breathed. This is incredible. We spent the first week unpacking, exploring the property, walking the beach. The nearest town was 15 minutes away. Small but friendly. The neighbors brought casseroles and welcomed us to the island. I set up Margaret's books in the study. I framed photos of her and hung them on the walls. Every morning I walked down to the beach and sat on the rocks and talked to her. I told her about the house, about Claire, about how right she'd been about everything. Claire enrolled in online courses. She started painting again, something she'd stopped doing when Stephen told her it was a waste of time. She painted the ocean, the rocks, the light on the water. Her work was extraordinary. The royalty payments came every quarter, deposited directly into my account, $280,000 a year, like clockwork. Margaret's books would be taught as long as Canadian literature was studied. Her words would support me for the rest of my life. 3 months after we left Toronto, Stephen called. Dad, we need to talk, he said. His voice was tight with rage. What's wrong? I asked, though I knew. What's wrong? What's wrong? The foundation of this house is collapsing. The inspector says it needs $400,000 in repairs, maybe more. And the property taxes just tripled. And there's some special assessment from the Homeowners Association for $50,000 due next month. You knew about this. You knew. And you gave me this disaster on purpose. I didn't know, I said calmly. Your mother handled all of that. I just knew it was too much for me to manage. You set me up. You gave me a money pit and then ran away to your little beach house. How did you even afford that place? Where's Mom's life insurance money going? I have a right to know. I'm your son. The beach house was your mother's. I said she bought it 20 years ago with her parents' money. It's mine now. As for her life insurance, that's also mine. As for being my son, you're right. You are. But you stopped acting like it the day your mother died. This is fraud. He hissed. I'm going to sue you. I'm going to take everything you have. I encourage you to talk to a lawyer, I said. You'll find that everything was done legally. The house was transferred to you as a gift. It's yours now. Congratulations. He hung up. He called back twice more over the next week, each time angrier than the last. I stopped answering. Through Claire, I heard what happened next. Stephen tried to sell the house, but no buyer would take it once the foundation issues were disclosed. He tried to get a loan to fix the foundation, but the bank wouldn't lend against a property with that much damage. He and Brittany fought constantly about money. She blamed him for taking the house without having it inspected. He blamed me for tricking him. Eventually, they sold it for less than the cost of the land alone, taking a massive loss just to get out from under it. The buyer was a developer who planned to tear it down and rebuild. Everything Margaret and I had built together was destroyed, but it was Stephen who destroyed it, not me. Claire and I stayed in Cape Breton. She finished her degree online and then got a job at a small museum in Halifax doing exactly what she'd always wanted to do. She rented an apartment there, but came home every weekend to paint and walk the beach. I wrote my own book finally, a memoir about teaching literature for 40 years, about meeting Margaret in graduate school, about building a life together. It wasn't a bestseller, but it was published by a small Canadian press and got kind reviews. Margaret would have been proud. Stephen never called again. Sometimes I thought about reaching out, but I never did. He'd made his choices. I'd made mine. On what would have been Margaret's 69th birthday, Claire and I took flowers down to the beach. We didn't have a grave to visit. Margaret had been cremated and her ashes scattered here in the ocean she'd loved. But we sat on the rocks and told stories about her. Do you think she knew it would end this way? Claire asked. With Dad losing everything and us out here. I think she knew exactly how it would end, I said. She knew Stephen would take the bait. She knew greed would blind him. She knew he'd never check, never question, never think past the immediate value of the house. And she knew I needed to be free of it. She saved us, Claire said quietly. Yes, I agreed. She did. The sun was setting over the Atlantic, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The waves crashed against the rocks in their eternal rhythm. Somewhere to the south in Toronto, Stephen was probably still bitter, still angry, still blaming everyone but himself for his choices. But that was his weight to carry, not mine. Margaret had given me a gift. Not just the house or the money, but freedom. Freedom from obligation to people who saw me as an asset instead of a father. Freedom from a house that had become a burden instead of a home. Freedom to spend whatever time I had left doing what I wanted with someone who loved me for who I was. I thought about that last letter she'd written me. The ending had stayed with me. Thomas, she'd written, by the time you read this, Stephen will have already shown you who he really is. I'm sorry I won't be there to protect you, but I can do this much. Don't let guilt control you. Don't let obligation trap you. You've spent 68 years being a good man, a good husband, a good father. You've earned the right to be free. Take Claire. Take the house. Take the life I'm leaving you. And live it fully, my darling. Live it for both of us. I'd lived by duty my whole life, teaching students who didn't care, grading papers at midnight, serving on committees, playing the political games required to survive academia. I'd been a good father to Stephen, even when he made it difficult. I'd been a devoted husband to Margaret through better and worse, sickness and health. Now finally, I was just Thomas, a man with a house by the ocean, a granddaughter who visited on weekends and enough money to live comfortably until I died. A man who spent his days reading, writing, walking the beach, and talking to his dead wife. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was a good life, maybe even a great one. The last light faded from the water and Claire and I walked back to the house. Through the windows, I could see the warm glow of the lamps we'd left on. Home. Real home. For the first time in years, Margaret had been right about everything. Stephen had shown his true nature within days of her death. He tried to control me, to trap me, to reduce me to a problem he could solve with paperwork and real estate transactions. He'd never once asked what I wanted. He'd never once considered that I might have plans of my own. And in trying to take everything, he'd ended up with nothing but debt and bitterness. I, on the other hand, had ended up with everything that mattered: peace, purpose, a place to belong, and the knowledge that Margaret, even in death, had loved me enough to plan for my freedom. As I unlocked the door and stepped inside, I could almost hear her voice. "See, Thomas, I told you it would work out." And she had. She'd told me in that letter, in her careful planning, in every detail she'd arranged. She'd known her son would try to take advantage of his grieving father. She'd known he'd see dollar signs instead of a parent who needed support, and she'd prepared the perfect trap. The house he'd wanted so badly had destroyed him financially. The house he'd dismissed as a useless cabin had become my sanctuary. Justice served cold and patient, exactly as Margaret had planned it. I made tea and sat in the study, surrounded by her books. Outside, the ocean continued its eternal conversation with the shore. Inside, I opened my laptop and started writing. There were more stories to tell, more years to remember, more time to honor the woman who'd saved me. Stephen might never understand what he'd lost when he chose money over family, but I understood what I'd gained, and that was enough. This is Twisted Reckoning. Hit subscribe for more tales of betrayal and brilliant payback.